Welcome, folks. Welcome, everyone. We are going to get started in just about less than a minute. Glad that everybody's able to make it today. We're going to be having folks trickling in over the next minute or so. Got a good amount of folks registered for today. Do me a favor, put in the chat if you can see and hear me. Put in the chat if you can see and hear me. I just want to make sure. Oh, and we got our lovely assistant Fergie here. I don't know how you got on the screen like that, but let me share my slides and let's try that right fast. But it's all good. Thank you for being here. Probably because you signed in also on our account. It's all good though, no worries. Folks, if you can put in the chat, if you can see and hear me, and if you can see the slides right now, I just want to make sure everyone can see and hear me. Go ahead, put in the chat. Also, go ahead and put in the chat, not in the Q&A, in the chat. Let's see if folks are putting things in the Q&A. Let me just check that. Oh, it says chat is disabled for me. Chat says disabled. Interesting. Have no idea what's going on there. Let me see if I can work that out real quick. Attendees can chat with everyone. Panelists can chat with everyone. Go, there it is. Excellent. Thanks, folks. Really appreciate that. I guess that was just some sort of Zoom glitch. Also, if you can, go ahead and put in the chat where you're calling in from, and are you a therapist? Are you an educator? Just let me know where you're calling in from. Buffalo, New York, San Diego, Austin, Texas, Tennessee. It's going so fast. This is excellent. Got a lot of great people here. I'm really excited. It's going so fast I can't even read it. Georgia, Arizona. Great. We got a lot of SUD therapists here. We got a lot of mentors. Excellent. Good. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to make sure everyone can see this here as well. Our wonderful assistant Fergie is going to drop the links into our socials here right now. Feel free to connect on Instagram, Facebook. We put a lot of content out, and of course on LinkedIn. I'm always interested in meeting folks out there. She's also going to put in the link to our brand new YouTube page for the Center for Adolescent Studies. Don't be alarmed if there's no videos there, because there's none, and we just started it. But we are going to be uploading a lot of helpful content almost daily starting in November. And the first thing we're going to upload is the replay to this webinar there. So go ahead and subscribe to our new YouTube page. And, it's just another way to stay in touch. So I'm going to get us started here because we're a little bit behind. Our sponsor today is Family Spring, which is our sister clinic. This webinar is put on by the Center for Adolescent Studies, and our other work is doing direct service work with Family Spring, where we work with youth, families, young adults who are struggling with substance use, struggling with mental health issues. So if you are a provider or person who knows anyone in California who needs help, because we only work in California, please refer them to our website, which is myfamilyspring.com. Just a little bit about me. I'm sorry, folks. I'm a little bit under the weather right now, but I'm going to try as much to bring as much energy as I can to this. For those of you who know, this was scheduled for a little over a month ago. I had a death in the family and I had to reschedule. Thank you so much for your flexibility. I am, even despite being a little under the weather, I'm very excited and happy to be here. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm a psychologist by trade. I really cut my teeth working with incarcerated youth, trauma-impacted youth, youth impacted by substances, and everything that comes with that. And I knew that in order to do this work effectively, I was really going to have to gain expertise in the kind of the multifacetedness of this work, meaning look at it through a trauma-informed lens. Substance use disorder doesn't occur in a vacuum, which we'll talk more about as well later today, and also just the co-occurringness nature of substance use disorder treatment, especially with young people. And over those years, I came up as I developed my expertise. I wrote a few books. That's my first book on the left. My second book, which is a little bit more relevant today, Mindfulness-Based Substance Abuse Treatment for Adolescents, a 12-session curriculum. I'm not going to push our training today, but stay on our email list. And at the about what are we at? We're October 25th, in maybe like 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to have a certification training for a mindfulness-based substance abuse treatment curriculum. So if you're interested in that, just stay on the list. I'm not going to talk about it as much today because I'm going to talk about a new free offering that we have at the Center for Adolescent Studies today. So stay tuned for that. My most recent book being Trauma-Informed Mindfulness with Teens, where I really bring a lot of the different expertises together. So anyways, the real reason why I do this work is because of my own struggles as a kid. Long story short, I was in and out of juvenile hall, struggled with drugs, struggled with anger, struggled with some forms of trauma. And I was able to turn my life around with a lot of help from the people around me, parents, community, therapists, mentors, and also a lot of inner work too. Mindfulness being a part of that, which is why I got so passionate about sharing it with young people. So that's why I'm here today. And of course, I wish if we were all in person, I'd hear a little bit more about yourselves. Everyone has a story. You all have stories for why you're doing what you're doing. And I just want to let you know that I know that there is a story to why you're doing what you're doing. And hopefully we'll stay connected and I can hear about that story one day. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to go over very briefly how important assessment is. And I know that's a little bit of ironic that it's very important, but I'm only going over it very briefly. And that's just because this is a super short webinar. It's very important to know that to assess so that we can know we're doing the accurate and skillful type of treatment. Then I'm going to go over some mindfulness skills, which is really the namesake of this webinar. So that's where we're going to spend the bulk. And of course, we're going to talk about engagement. How do we get young people to even be receptive to us teaching them a mindfulness practice? And that has to do with the relationship and emotional safety and trust. That we'll do a little bit of Q&A at the end, maybe just a couple of minutes. So please, 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 when you have a question, go ahead and put it in the Q&A, not in the chat. I am not going to be looking at the chat throughout that presentation because there's so much going on that it will throw me off, because looks like there's about 570 people on right now. So put your question in the Q&A, and if we have time, we'll get to it. This training is being recorded and there will be a replay going out. Now, we are going to put this on the YouTube channel. For those of you who signed up and registered, you will get the replay. I'll give you instructions on how to get that later today, along with your certificate of completion for this and how to get your CE and all of that stuff. That'll come at the end of today, and we'll give you instructions for how to get all of that. And even though this will be housed on our YouTube channel, for those who didn't attend the webinar or register for the webinar, they won't be eligible for CE or for certificates or anything like that. But you'll get all that information at the end. And then I just want to put it out there one more time. I got 52 minutes before I get you out of here on time. So that is a super short, very introductory webinar. So there's only so much we can cover, okay? And I just want to put that out there. We're just scratching the surface today. If you're interested in more trainings, we will have those opportunities in the future. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we get towards the end of the training. So let's hop right in. I think, this slide, I'm most likely preaching to the choir here, right? Like, there's an issue with substance use and mental health challenges in the United States, in the world, really. And you see some of these stats up here about Americans, struggling with SUD, youth struggling with mental health challenges. And you probably know that COVID, the pandemic, even though we're, kind of coming out of it, but there's other variants coming up. It's like we're still kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It was really tough for young people, particularly for youth and young adults. And I'm not going to go too much into this research article you see on your screen right here, but just know that, and we will give you the slides to this training as well, so you can pull this research article if you'd like. But just know that it was tough and things got exacerbated, and that doesn't, there was no exception to substance use disorder and mental health challenges for teens and young adults. It was very tough throughout COVID, right? And that's our problem. That's why we're here today. So the first thing that's really important when it comes to assessment is We as clinicians, you may be a licensed psychologist, you may be a certified substance use disorder counselor, you may be a paraprofessional who works in some way with substance using young people or young adults. It's really important to have an assessment process. The reality is, substance use disorder does not happen in a vacuum. There was an old guard a long time ago that mental health treatment was over here and substance use addiction treatment is over here, and they were completely siloed off from each other. The reality is, and this is not an absolute rule, obviously, but the reality is that most young people who meet the criteria for a substance use disorder, even a mild substance use disorder, usually have something else going on. There's usually some form of co-occurring mental health challenge. So when you're doing substance use treatment, you're actually doing mental health treatment. Now, of course, there's people who get mental health treatment and go to therapy who don't have a substance use problem, but that's not what we're talking about today. Most people who have even a mild substance use disorder issue, and of course the rate goes up as you go into moderate and severe, they will have some sort of co-occurring issue. And for a lot of people who have that, quote unquote, deep addiction, substance dependence, or severe substance use disorder, as the field calls it now, oftentimes there's some form of trauma. There's some form of complex trauma, developmental trauma, PTSD that is co-occurring with that. And again, this is not an absolute rule, but the substance use is a behavior that gets conditioned over time as a way to cope, right? Again, I'm a broken record. It's not an absolute rule. It's not always that. But more often than not, there's something like that going on. So that's why it's so important to assess, because somebody who has a substance use disorder, who has a deep history of trauma because they grew up in a community of violence and witnessed abuse and went through poverty, that may be a different treatment plan than somebody who um, grew up in more of a wealthy economic area, but struggles with social anxiety or deep anxiety or something like that, who is also using substances. Both of those scenarios are relevant. Both of those people deserve treatment, but those treatment approaches may be slightly different, right? So it's important to know that what you're looking at on your screen right now, this is not exhaustive, but this is kind of, as a clinician, what I think about and what I train my clinicians to think about. What are the external areas of assessment? What are the spheres of experience that folks may have related to substance use disorder? How severe is it? Is there family history? Are they in trouble with the law? Are they going to school? Are they hanging out with people who smoke a lot of weed or drink a lot of alcohol or whatever it is, right? Do they have a history of violence? Again, not exhaustive, but just starts to point you towards what's going on in their life, so that I can start to hypothesize, how might I be able to help this person, right? Same thing with the internal areas of assessment. It's like, are they using the substance for self-medication? Again, a lot of people do, but not necessarily everybody does. And if they are, and if somebody who is versus somebody who isn't, that would possibly be two different forms of treatment, right? So that's all I'm going to say for now about treatment. Just know that, oh, actually, two other slides. Sorry. I wanted to just share this with you, and if you'd like, you can go back and look at these slides, and essentially, if you Google these, you will be able to download most of them. Probably the number one screening tool that's used is the CRAFT, which you see up here, that stands for CAR. Have you ever used drugs in a car? Have you ever used drugs to relax? Have you ever used when you're alone? Have you ever used it to forget? Have your friends and family ever told you to stop, or you used too much? Have you ever been in trouble? It's a really good screening tool for a general clinic, or even a general population in a school or a health clinic or something like that, right? It's not as good of a tool if you're working with really, really severe clients. Like, for example, we at Family Spring, we run programs in our local juvenile hall. And so there's a lot of trauma there, and there's a lot of drug use, right? So since this is just a screening tool, it's always going to, 9 out of 10 times, it checks the box of more assessment is needed, because that's all a screening tool tells you. It tells you Is more assessment needed? Do they possibly have an issue with substance use, or is there likely not an issue with substance use, right? So when we're working with our youth who have a lot of stuff going on in their lives, we use the Maisie 2 as a screening tool because it takes into account a little bit more. They're both good tools as screeners, not as full assessment, but as screeners, and they're for different populations. And as you see, I won't go through all of these, but these are some of the assessment tools that are out there that are a step up from a screening tool. An assessment tool gives you when you provide a tool like this, where somebody's, especially if they're self-reporting, it's really important to never overemphasize test results or survey results. You, as the clinician or the provider, it's up to you to interpret those results, put that together with that individual's history, their family history, their upbringing, all of those things, the clinical interview that you utilize to then come up with your kind of the results of your assessment. With that being said, something like the SASE and the CANS and the BASC, those are slightly more in-depth assessment tools and will give you more information. And the reason we do it is because, again, this is the point of emphasis. Accurate assessment leads to accurate treatment planning. Some people come into our offices, they may not need treatment. They may need a pro-social after-school activity. Get involved in basketball or the chess club, or do something that's pro-social that can help you stay out of trouble, basically, right? That's not most people that come through our clinic, because when they come to us, they usually have a little bit more of a severe problem. But for some people, that's a viable intervention. Do they need once a week outpatient therapy with a group and a one-on-one therapist? Do they need intensive outpatient therapy multiple times a week, 9, 10 hours a week? Do they need to go to residential treatment because the issue is that bad? That's why we practice assessment. We practice assessment to really investigate what's going on in an individual's lives so that we can come up with an accurate treatment plan that has the best opportunity to help, right? My bias, and this is just me, but my bias is, how can we provide treatment in the least restrictive environment? So, like, if a kid is really, really, really severe in their substance use and all of the behaviors that go along with it, a lot of people will start thinking over here, that maybe they should go to residential treatment, or they might get locked up or something like that. And sometimes that's true, but I always ask, have they tried a lower level of treatment first? Have they really tried it? Has the family been involved? Have they really bought into it, right? Because you want to try these things before you escalate to that. And again, that all has to do with assessment. So assessment's really important. That's the main takeaway. Read up on some of those tools that I had, or that I haven't had on the previous slide. If you're working right now directly with substance using youth, young adults, make sure, whether you're in private practice or working for a clinic or an agency, make sure there's a standardized assessment process in place. Not standardized as in you have to just use this one test and only that one test, but standardized in the sense that we have a process as an agency, and we don't, for example, just throw somebody in our virtual substance use group without talking to them first and interviewing them and interviewing their family to make sure this is an appropriate level of care for them. So make sure you have that assessment process. I want to transition in kind of to the bulk of what we're going to be talking about today, which is our mindfulness skills, right? Like, let's say you have somebody in treatment, you've assessed that, whatever you're providing is an appropriate level of care, and you work on engagement, building a relationship, which we'll talk about last here. And you have somebody, maybe they're not, excited to be in therapy or to be in treatment with you, but they're at least ambivalent, and they're enough for you to build some trust and actually get them to practice some of these skills. Our goal is to help them develop these skills so that they can move the needle in practice and get a little bit better at them. Help with self-regulation, help with impulse control, help with managing cravings of drug use and all of the other, impulses that come up for young people, so that they can get some confidence in positive reinforcement and start to move that needle, right? And so this is not exhaustive of all types of treatment. Think of mindfulness as, an aspect of treatment. And this is one tool we can teach them. So let's dive into it a little bit. I like to define mindfulness through a metaphor. So whenever I start a new mindfulness group or have a new young person that I'm working with through, who's struggling with substance use disorder, I always hit him with this metaphor. It's called the lion mind versus dog mind metaphor. And it's a great way to just get them to start thinking about what mindfulness is and what the usefulness or the utility of mindfulness is. So it goes a little something like this. Let's say I'm standing in front of this dog right here that you're seeing on your screen. And this is my meditation bell. Let's say this is a bone. And I'm standing in front of this dog and I wave the bone in the dog's face. And then I throw the bone 10 yards to the right. What do you think the dog is going to do in that situation? If you feel like engaging right now, you can put your answer in the chat. What do you think the dog is going to do in that situation? I'm not looking at the chat, but most people usually say something like the dog is going to go after the bone, right? And most of the time, the dogs usually go after the bone. Now, let's say, I don't know why I'd ever be in this situation. Let's say I'm standing in front of this majestic looking lion right here, and I got my bone and I wave the bone in the lion's face, and I throw the bone 5 yards to the left. What do you think the lion is going to do right there? If you feel like engaging again, you can put it in the chat. Oftentimes, whether I'm working with youth or whether I'm working, with professionals like this in public trainings, people will say something like the lion will go after you, the lion will eat you. And I always say the lion could come after me, the lion might come after me. But there's a fundamental difference between the mind of the lion and the mind of the dog. With the dog, what are the eyes of the dog doing? When I wave the bone in the dog's face, the eyes are locked on the bone. I wave it over here, the eyes track the bone. I throw it over there, the dog goes and gets the bone. So for that brief time frame, the dog just sees the bone. It's all of the dog's reality. So if I control the bone, I control the dog's reality, even if it's just for that little bit of time. But with the lion, it's different. What are the eyes of the lion doing when I'm waving the bone in the lion's face? Again, I have no idea. I've never been in this situation, but it's just a metaphor. So we'll go with the lion's eyes are locked on me. They're not looking at the bone, right? Can the lion see the bone? Yes, the lion can see the bone, but the bone is a small piece of a larger reality. The lion sees the bone. The lion also sees a person holding the bone, right? What does that offer the lion? It offers the lion autonomy and choicefulness. That perspective offers the lion autonomy and choicefulness. So I throw the bone over there. The lion could go get the bone. The lion could come after me. The lion could stare at me. The lion could be thinking, why would I go after that bone when there's more bones in your body than you just threw over there? And by the way, it has a bunch of meat on it, right? It gives the lion choicefulness. So if we were to take that metaphor and analogize it one step further to our experience, imagine the bone of anger arising inside of you, anxiety, triggered trauma, a strong craving to use drugs. If anger arises inside of me and I react with the mind of the dog or the puppy, what do? I do whatever it is I do when I get angry. It's tunnel vision. I can't see anything beyond that bone of anger. If I yell, I yell. If I cuss, I cuss. If my fist clenched, my fist clenched. If I fight, I fight. It's automatic reactive behavior. But it's different with the mind of the lion. If the bone of anger arises in my experience and I approach it and respond with the mind of the lion, I might think to myself, I'm angry right now. That's even categorically different than the dog mind, who's not thinking I'm angry right now, which is a meta thought, a thought about our experience, right? The dog is in such a seeing red tunnel vision that there's no thought. This part of the brain is compromised, right? So with the lion, I might think I'm angry right now. That puts a little tiny bit of distance between me and the anger itself. Or I might have an insight if I've had some experience with anger, right? I've been angry before, I'll be angry again. This experience will not last forever. I might think that, or I might just have that insight. I might not think it through just like that, right? But the fact of the matter is, when I do that, even more distance is between me and the anger itself. That's the process of what's called disidentification, right? Not detachment. I'm not detaching from my experience, but I'm disidentifying from it. I am not my anger. My anger is not the totality of who I, Sam, am. It is just an experience that's arising. Now, I could have an issue. I could have anger issues, and it could come up. It could be patterned behavior or a patterned experience that comes up over and over and over again. But the idea is with training, you can create that distance, that disidentification between you and the experience you're having. That's what the lion mind is, and that's what mindfulness is. Before we get to a quick meditation, I just want to say, what did I not say right there? I said that mindfulness is the lion mind. Another way to say that is mindfulness is present moment, non reactive awareness. Present moment, non reactive awareness. Now, I like to, when I'm working with young people, and just people in general, to be honest with you, I like to deliver them that metaphor and facilitate that metaphor because it's less ambiguous than just the one liner of mindfulness is present moment non-reactive awareness, which is good. It's simple. It's good to be simplistic, but the metaphor of the lion mind versus the dog mind is a symbol, and it's and when young people symbolize that lion with that bone going across their screen of experience, or those bones going across their screens of experience, it's a symbol that they can hold in their mind. And so when you do that, when you facilitate that um, metaphor, it's something that they can keep with them as a language thread. So I go into the juvenile hall, for example. I'm going in there tonight, for example, and if I work with a youth who I saw last week, and let's just say, for example, they got into a fight, I can say to them, were you operating from the reactive puppy mind, the dog mind, or were you operating from the responsive lion mind? It's a language thread that we can hold in our work, and they know exactly what it means because they have that mental image of that dignified lion sitting there, not reacting to the bone itself, right? And so what's really important here is what I didn't say, what I didn't define mindfulness as, and this is the most common misconception I hear about in training folks all over the world. I didn't define it as calm, relaxing, having no thoughts. It's literally welcoming and being present to what your experience is, but cultivating that attitude of reactiveness, of non-judgment. That's what mindfulness is. And it's very important that the young people that we work with know that the goal is not just to try and relax, because with people with severe substance use disorder issues and trauma, there's going to be times when their internal nervous system is telling them to do anything but calm down, anything but relax. So if they try a technique you teach them, it may not work, and they may say to themselves, this stuff doesn't work, and throw it in the trash. And then the face validity of the intervention itself goes down, and it's that much harder to get them to practice. But if you tell them from the get-go, when you're meditating, when you're practicing mindfulness, which doesn't have to be just meditation, right? We'll go over that in a moment. When you're practicing mindfulness, whatever comes up inside of you, whatever bones of experiences, thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, if you let them know you can't get that part wrong, then you're setting them up to be more open to mindfulness, to meditation, right? We're increasing the face validity, even if it's just a little bit. So we've been talking about it. Let's do a practice together. I'd like to take us through just a 2-3 minute mindful breathing practice, which is one common mindfulness meditation that often gets taught for folks who are just starting out. And even if you're a seasoned veteran in terms of meditating, it's a common practice. So what I'd like to invite you to do, if you're comfortable, it's totally up to you if you want to do this, is get in a comfortable position. It's good to have your feet flat on the floor. I do invite you to close your eyes, but you absolutely 100% do not have to close your eyes if you don't want to. And before we get into this, let me just check one quick setting real quick because okay, I'm not gonna mess with it actually. Um, oops, here we go. Let me go backwards. There we go. Okay. So just let yourself get in a comfortable position. Let your eyes close. Again, if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, you absolutely 100% don't have to. And when you hear the sound of the bell, just start by bringing your awareness to your breath and then wait for further instructions. We'll only do this for about 2 minutes. Breathing in and breathing out. Just take a few moments and notice where it's easiest to sense your breath. That might be in the nostrils, feeling the touch of the air as you breathe in and breathe out. Or it might be in the belly or the chest or the rib cage, noticing the expansion and contraction as you breathe in and breathe out. Wherever it's easiest, just let your awareness rest right there. Breathing in and breathing out. You might notice after a few breaths in and a few breaths out that your mind wanders away from the breath. You start to think about things other than the breath. Whenever that happens, just know you're not doing anything wrong. It's totally normal for the mind to wander. It's totally normal for a bunch of bones coming up in your awareness, thoughts, experiences. Whenever that happens, just gently and without judgment, redirect your awareness back to wherever it's easiest to sense the breath. Breathing in and breathing out. The mind may be calm, or it may be active and even chaotic. Whatever it is, remember, you can't get that part wrong. Whatever it is, that's okay. Our goal is to use the breath to draw our awareness into this present moment over and over again. Breathing in and breathing out. In a moment, I'll ring the bell. And when I do, I just want to invite you to listen to the sound of the bell until you can't hear it any longer or until it's no longer there. And then when you feel comfortable, if your eyes were closed, you can slowly open them, expanding your awareness to outside of the formal exercise, and just take a moment to transition, stretch, readjust, sip your coffee, water, tea. And if you feel so called, you could put in the chat, if we could have a few volunteers put in the chat, what was that like for you? How was it for you to do that 3 minutes or so meditation? Good. I'm seeing calming, relaxing, peaceful. Whatever your experience is, it's totally okay. And I see a lot of folks coming into the chat right now. A lot of calming, relaxing, right? Oh, someone says consistently redirecting their mind. That's absolutely right. So for some of you, the experience is calming and relaxing. It's also not uncommon if your mind was still just all over the place. Remember, it's not about having a calm and relaxed mind. Now, if that's what your experience was, that's 1,000% okay, right? This practice is designed to be more than just a few minutes. It's okay to start with a few minutes, especially if you're sharing this clinically with clients who are not, going to meditation temples to be a meditator, right? You're doing it for some clinical utility. Of course, it's okay to start with a minute or two. But these practices were designed for much longer. For those of you who are calm, for example, imagine if we practice that for 10 minutes. Imagine if we practice it for 30 minutes. what's going to happen is you're going to have a much more normal up and down experience. Sometimes I feel calm and this is amazing and bliss, right? And then sometimes it's like my back hurts and I get all these thoughts. When is this thing going to be over? Lunchtime's coming up, right? That, and then 5 minutes later you're calm again, right? That's like a normal trajectory. And the reason why it's good to over time build up your minutes in meditation is so that you can have that experience. Every time the mind goes to your back and you're like, my back hurts, that's a judgment. That's a form of reactivity, right? Or every time your mind wanders away to think about lunch and what's coming up next. Again, it's not bad that those things are happening. It's, can we start to cultivate the lion mind for those bones of experience that come up? We're not trying to push them away. We're trying to observe them. We're trying to practice non judgment and non reactivity. That's what the practice is about. So I really appreciate those of you who were able to do that. Remember, this is being recorded. So if you can't, if you weren't able to do that with us because you got kids in the background, you can always get it on what's it called, the recording. Now, mindfulness meditation is one slice of the pie of what mindfulness is. Remember, mindfulness is the lion mind. You don't have to be meditating to do that, right? That's oftentimes the misconceptions about mindfulness being a calming strategy and things like that, which there's nothing wrong with calming strategies. It's just a slightly different technique. The misconception comes through meditation because a lot of people meditate and they start to feel something, right? But you could be practicing the lion mind and practicing mindfulness right here and now, listening to me, right? There's going to be a lot of people you work with, especially those with high trauma, that aren't ready for meditation for one reason or another, right? So how do we approach them? What's our treatment plan with them? How do we start to build little moments of awareness where over time we can build that capacity so that they can tolerate their inner experience, so that it can build on that, and then maybe one day do a formal meditation. I like to use the acronym TAP, which I developed to work originally actually with teachers and therapists who are dealing with very resistant young people and challenging this behaviors, right? Because we can get triggered too, and it's really important to bring mindfulness in our work. It's more important to bring mindfulness in our work to ourselves even before we share it or teach it to somebody else. And at the time I developed it, I was working with a lot of youth who colloquially would say the phrase, when I would see them to do our sessions, they'd say the phrase like, "Hey, what's up, Sam? Let's tap in," as in like, let's check in. So I came up with this mindfulness acronym called TAP, which it stands for take a breath, acknowledge, proceed, which essentially is, if you think about it, right? Mindfulness acronyms are nothing new. That we use other ones in our curriculum too, but this is a good one to think to yourself, do I need, let's say you're getting a little frustrated, or even in positive experiences of a joy or whatever, right? You're going through your day. Anytime, at any point, you don't have to close your eyes. You don't even have to say you're doing meditation or mindfulness or anything like that. All you do is pause and think to yourself, let me tap in with myself. You pause, you take a breath, breathe, and you can just do it right here with me. Breathe in and breathe out. And the breath, yes, it might calm your nervous system a little bit when you take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, even though, again, calming isn't the point. But really, it's for the pause. It helps you pause to look inward. Then you acknowledge. The A is acknowledge. How am I feeling right now? What's my experience right now, right? Or even a level deeper, what's authentic for me right now, right? And then finally, the P is proceed. What do I want to do? How do I want to show up? Who do I want to be in this moment? Right? That's what tap is. Take a breath, acknowledge, proceed. All you have to remember is all I need to do is tap in with myself. You can practice this, which I highly recommend for yourself. I highly recommend teaching it to your clients as well, because this is something you can do. No eyes closing, no meditative posture, no talk of mindfulness or anything like that, or meditation that could be triggering for some people, but it starts to get them to practice in that moment how to be with themselves and how to learn to not judge and to observe. Then one breath can turn into 2 breaths. It could turn into 3 breaths. It could turn into 30 seconds. It could turn into a minute down the line. Because for some people, they may get triggered. They may not want to do meditation. They may be willing to do meditation, but they have so much trauma that their nervous system gets overwhelmed anytime they close their eyes or anything like that, right? So this could be a good starting point. And even if you're big into a formal meditation and your clients are, it's really important to have tools that we'd consider um, daily mindfulness or informal mindfulness, or what I like to call mindfulness beyond meditation, because this is what we use on the daily. This is what we use in the in-between moments. When a client says something that throws you off, tap in with yourself. When you're starting to get in an argument with your romantic partner or your kids, tap in with yourself. When your boss or supervisor sends you an email that lacks tone and you're about to send them that angry email back, tap in with yourself first. How do I want to proceed? Who do I want to show up as in this moment, right? That's the power of tap. It really puts you in the driver's seat of your consciousness. And it's a muscle. At first, it's hard. It's very difficult to do when you're angry or when you're triggered. But over time, you can train yourself to get better at it. And you can also train your clients to get better at it as well. A couple months ago, one of my clients walked in and showed me this tattoo. And it was because I had taught them this technique and it was so powerful for them. This was a trauma client who had so much trauma that it was very difficult to meditate. Resistant to meditation because it's just not for me, but also I don't want to go inward for too long. So we worked on tap, and it was so powerful for this person that they got this tattoo right here on their wrist, essentially to remind themselves, right? And they showed me one day and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And, they let me use the picture. They knew I was going to use it in presentations and things like that. So that's how powerful this can be. That's somebody who tried it, it worked for them, and then they really became a champion of it. And when that happens, you gain more confidence. And when you gain more confidence, that's natural positive reinforcement, the momentum of your ability to form the habit, which is the hardest thing, increases, and then you get proficient in tap, and then one day maybe you even master it, right? And of course, with that comes better mental health, better emotional regulation, overall better quality of well-being in life, like what's happening for this person. So that's mindfulness. Again, we just scratched the surface with it, right? You just got a little bit of a flavor of how I teach mindfulness to young people or to clients who are struggling with substance use disorder. There is so much more to it. And if you are ever interested, I actually have the book right here. This was the book I referenced earlier, Mindfulness-Based Substance Abuse Treatment Curriculum for Adolescents. Even if you work with adults, it's okay. It's and just Google it on Amazon or something and you'll be able to buy it there if you're interested in it. It's a multifaceted curriculum. So what we just went over was so just the surface that we just kind of talked about what mindfulness was and a couple of techniques, right? This book is a manual that has a number of different activities for how to become aware of your triggers and work from a mindful perspective for with your cravings and triggers, how to develop insight around why we use and develop a value system and things like that, right? So I just wanted to put the caveat out there that it's very multifaceted when we do real treatment, and mindfulness is an aspect of treatment. It's not the totality of treatment. And so in the next 10 minutes or so, I just want to finish up talking about the relationship. Again, another ironic point I'm going to make here, probably the most important thing in my work anecdotally, and we're not spending as much time as I'd like on it. But and the research supports this too, just that the therapeutic relationship between you and the people you work with, if young people or if clients or patients see you as somebody who's caring, understanding, can take their perspective, outcome goes up across substance use, depression, anxiety, mental health treatment, right? And there's even research in the education world, in the non-therapy worlds, that show that too, that the quality relationship between the teacher and the student has a positive impact on educational outcome as well. So hopefully I'm not preaching too much to the choir here, but just in case, I think it's important to go over, how do we actually, what are some of the pragmatic building blocks of building an authentic, trusting, emotionally safe relationship, right? Because a lot of people, my pet peeve is we go to conferences and trainings and they'll have the new hot intervention, CBT, blah blah blah, whatever the new intervention is out, and it's like, yeah, you got to build rapport, and then here are all the techniques, and it's like I really like to slow down sometimes and talk about the art of what it means to build rapport with youth, because a lot of the youth we work with, young adults, even older adults, and teens in substance use treatment. One of the assumptions that is not present is, I mean, not always, right? But a lot of times with younger people, they don't want to be there. So they're not as motivated. There's more likelihood of resistance. So if we can take down some of that person made resistance by intentionally creating a safe environment, we're going to get better outcomes. And this is just a quick quote. Somebody who's been in the business for over 25 years talked about why it's so important to build relationships. I'll spare you reading all the way through it. Quick pop quiz. Who knows who this gentleman is right here? You could put it in the chat. I'm just going to pull up the chat and see if anybody gets this. Who is this person that you see right here? I'm not going to. Yep, there we go. We got it. Thich Nhat Hanh. Thank you. Yes, rest in peace for sure. So, one very simple way when you first meet somebody, especially if they're in treatment, to start to build rapport, and this is not going to be rocket science. Hopefully, it's not going to blow your mind. A lot of you probably already do this, is to practice what Thich Nhat Hanh calls deep listening. It's a form of reflective listening. It's the type of listening that can help relieve the suffering of the other person. You can call it compassionate listening, as they likes to say. You listen with one purpose: help them empty their heart. So pragmatically, what deep listening is, there's two things, there's a lot of things going on. But the biggest thing, especially with young people, right? Imagine the average teenager comes in. What are they used to? They're used to adults telling them what to do and what not to do. Sometimes even therapists, right? And when you're a therapist, there may be a time to offer your opinion when you have a deep, strong, leveraged relationship. But when you first meet them, if you go into kind of solutions focused mode, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, preaching, advice giving, things like that, oftentimes a person-made barrier comes up. If you practice deep listening, you're giving them a socio-culturally corrective experience. You're giving them the time of day that a lot of adults in their life don't even give them, right? So that's one thing that's happening. Now, pragmatically, when we're practicing deep listening, what we're doing with our mind is it's a mindfulness practice. It's a mindfulness listening practice. So think of the lion mind. We're present. We have some anchor that's grounding us in the present moment. In that meditation, we are practicing with our breath. It could be your breath or a part of your body that some of your awareness is on to keep you here and now. And most of your awareness is on the story of the other. And when that happens, there's more of a likelihood that you will actually have a stronger connection with them. People can feel this. I'm sure some of you have heard this before. I've certainly heard it before. People will work with you for the first couple of times and they'll say something like, I like your vibes, you're different from the other teachers and other therapists. What they're saying when they say that is, I feel safe with you. Like there's something about you, I might not be able to fully articulate it, but there's something about you that works for me. I don't feel judged, and this could work, and that's what's happening. When you listen to them cognitively, there's more of a chance, if you listen to their story, there's more of a chance you'll understand them from a cognitive perspective. If you understand them from a cognitive perspective and practice perspective taking, there's more of a chance that you'll understand them, or at least attempt to understand them from an emotional standpoint. Empathy, what's it like to be this person, right? Or at least attempt to ask that question. And empathy is the doorstep of compassion. What's it like to be this person? It must be tough. There's so much tragedy and suffering, right? That is a breeding ground for compassion. Compassion being, I am witnessing you in your suffering and hoping, wishing for the alleviation of that suffering. That's the part in the research. A lot of research has been done when they see us as caring, compassionate, understanding, right? And some of that comes through self-disclosure, which we'll talk about in a moment. And some of that's just a vibe, like we talked about. That's how connection goes up. That's how outcome goes up, right? So it doesn't always happen like this. It's not always this linear, right? But just to give you a sense of something so simple, deep listening, right? How can I get out of that solutions focus mode? Time and a place for solution focus, right? I'm not calling it evil or anything like that, but a time and a place, right? When we're in the initial stages of rapport building, how can I pause, turn off the inner therapist in a way, not get in my own way, and really be fully present to them? That oftentimes translates into a felt sense. Now, the other side of the coin, deep listening is a receptive practice, right? Skillful self disclosure is an offering practice. And that's the other side of the coin to build relationship early on, particularly with young people. Now, note that I say the phrase skillful self disclosure. I do not mean just, regurgitate your whole life story on them and make it about you. Skillful means, oh, let's do a pop quiz real quick. Put in the chat what skillful self disclosure means to you. How do you define skillful self disclosure? Anyone? Only if it helps. Benefits the client. On purpose. Exactly. You're all right, right? So, skillful self disclosure for me, and a lot of you have variations on this, is I ask myself this question: is what I'm about to say in the best interest of the client? Is what I'm about to say in their best interest? Will it help in some way? Will it add value in some way? Automatically, when I do that, I'm putting myself in the consciousness seat, right? I'm not just speaking without thinking about it. I told you at the beginning of this session today that I had been in and out of juvenile hall. And what I didn't say was I work in the juvenile hall that I used to be incarcerated in. Our organization has a contract there. And there's a lot of youth that I work with that I've never told that I've been incarcerated in that juvenile hall because I didn't think it would add any value. And there's some youth that I have told. And just because I go through that process and ask myself that question, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm always going to be right. I might ask myself, consider this scenario. You just lost a family member. Or let's say you just had a client who lost a family member a couple weeks ago. They're raw. They're feeling alone. They are cut off from the world, hopeless, depressed. You ask yourself, should I tell them that I lost a family member 4 months ago? It'll help them be more connected. It'll help them feel like they're not alone in this, that a lot of people, everybody at some point deals with death. So you check that box off. Yes, this would add value to them. Then you go on and you start to disclose. And in that disclosure, you quickly get triggered. You quickly realize, I have not finished my own grieving process. And you start to cry. Totally okay to cry in front of your clients, but this is not the cute cry. This is not the controlled cry. This is the cry that does not look good. Your face is mangled, snot's coming out. You're triggered. You're not ready to disclose that. The risk of that, if that happens, is who in those moments is the client and who is the therapist? Who is holding space for who, right? So it's not only is it in their best interest, it's am I ready to share what I'm going to share? Last thing I want to say about this, self-disclosure, the most powerful, and this is my opinion, the most powerful forms of self-disclosure are not events of life history. So there's four types of self-disclosure. Let me see. I don't have I don't have the book readily available, but there's a book that I highly recommend everybody to check out called The Gift of Therapy by Irving Yalom. I'm just scanning my environment to see if I can find it. Anyways, The Gift of Therapy by Irving Yalom. He talks about three types of self-disclosure. One, life history. I used to do drugs, or I've been through what you've been through, or I've been locked up. That's all life history information. Two, arguably the most powerful, in my opinion, here and now feelings towards the client. And three, mechanisms of therapy, like basically being transparent. I'm asking you to do this mindfulness activity because XYZ, like letting them know about your thinking. You don't kind of keep it behind the veil. The fourth kind that he doesn't talk about in his book that I believe is always happening is nonverbal forms of self-disclosure. If I go in and facilitate a group with young people, usually I'm just dressed very casually. I have a short sleeve shirt on. They see all my tattoos. They see the ring on my finger. They start to create a story about me, right? That's another form of self-disclosure. Life history can sometimes be helpful in building rapport, but just because you've had the same experience of some as somebody on paper doesn't mean it's the same subjective experience, and it puts you open at the risk is that you start to project your experience onto them, and then you could actually miss them in their experience, which could actually work against you. But it can still be very powerful at times. Don't get me wrong. But sharing things like, I remember one time I shared with this young person how much compassion I was feeling with them in the moment. He had just told me this story of crossing the border as a 9-year old. It was a horrific, tragic story that I still sometimes tear up on when I hear it. It's a 9-year old days just having this horrific experience, right? And I paused. This was like 15 years ago. I still remember this like it was yesterday. I paused to him and I did a little version of tap, even though I didn't have that language back there. What am I feeling like right now? God, I'm feeling so much compassion. And I just looked at him and I said, I'm feeling visceral compassion for you, man. I'm so sorry that you went through that. I just wanted to let you know that what's arising for me is compassion. That's a form of skillful self-disclosure. And you can also do that in situations that are tense where you need to set a boundary because boundaries are super important. I don't have time to go over that example today. But those are examples of how powerful it can be. And literally, what I'm doing in that last example is I'm telling them that I'm compassionate. And of course, it's got to be genuine because they can feel if it's not a lot of the times. But that's me telling them that I'm compassionate so that, this. Let me see. Let me go back to this side. So this part right here, I'm literally verbalizing that to them so that, they can start to view me that way. And then connection goes up and outcome goes up, like I was saying, right? So we talked about two very, very basic things when it comes to self-disclosure. Or let me take it from the top. The summary of today is a little bit on assessment, a little bit more on the technique of mindfulness, and hopefully gave you a couple of pragmatic things you can use. Please take the lion mind metaphor and use it, make it your own. As long as it exemplifies what mindfulness is, if you can make it better, please do that. Take the mindful breathing practice, take tap, use that for yourself and the people you're working with, right? And then we ended with not long enough on what it means to actually, like, some of the building blocks of building an emotionally safe relationship, because if they're more receptive to me, they're going to be more receptive to whatever I have to offer, whether it's mindfulness, somatic therapy, CBT, whatever it is, right? And when it comes to skillful self-disclosure, we just talked about two elements of it, and there's a lot more. I've done a whole day long just on self-disclosure before. Element one being deep listening, that's a receptive practice. Element two being skillful self-disclosure, which should not be done insensitively. Skillful means appropriate. It means healthy. It means I'm doing it in the interest of them. So you're not just spewing out your story, right? And here we are, folks. So I'm going to look at the Q&A and see if we can get a question or two. Let me scroll down here. Let me make sure scrolling down. Okay, can you please repeat the name of the book or add it to the chat? Went over a couple of books. The last one was The Gift of Therapy by Irving Yalom. Maybe, Fergie, if you could just put the name of that in the chat, The Gift of Therapy. Look it up on Amazon. It's there. And then the only other question I see here is about the mindfulness curriculum. Can we show it again? That was about 10 minutes ago. Sorry about that. Mindfulness-based substance abuse treatment. I only wrote the book. I should know the title. Mindfulness-based substance abuse treatment for adolescents, a 12-session curriculum. Also, if you could put that in the chat, Fergie. And again, that's something, if you just go to Amazon and put in mindfulness-based substance abuse treatment, it should be the first one that comes up. It may be, but it'll definitely be on the first page. So if there's no other questions, I'd like to finish with a question I often get, which is, how do we get more training on mindfulness, resiliency, substance use treatment, self-care, building relationships, and more? And that's what I'm here to talk about today. We have some very exciting news, folks. I want to invite you to register for what we are calling and hoping to live up to the best free, notice that it's free, the best free training community around building relationships, trauma-informed care, resilience, substance use treatment. Basically, if you are a helping professional, if you're a therapist, an educator, a mentor, a case manager, if you work with substance using youth, trauma-impacted youth, trauma-impacted adults, people with mental health issues, and you want to continuously refine your work and get better, build your own resiliency so that you can help them build their self-care practices and resiliency, this is the training community for you. What do you get in this community that is 100% free? You get 4 free self-paced courses. You see them right here. This is over 6 hours of, and for those of you who need continuing education, you'll get all your continuing education credits, right? We have trauma basics for youth workers, teaching mindfulness to teens, resilience and self-care for helping helping professionals, and introduction to compassion as a self-care tool. Over 6 hours, completely free, folks. Alongside with this, and this is where the power of the community really starts to come in, once a month we will get on a Zoom call live. It will not be a Zoom webinar like this. This is a webinar where you can see me, I cannot see you. The Zoom live call will be where everyone could see each other so that we can delve into these topics and more, so that you can say, hey, I just had this experience. I was facilitating the group. I need some support, right? We're not your employer or anything like that, so we can't always tell you what to do, but we can give you support. You can ask peers questions. You can ask me questions. We'll meditate. We'll practice mindfulness. We'll bring some slides. We'll have guest speakers, right? From time to time. We'll do this on first Fridays of the month. First one is coming up on November 4th, just in about a week and a half. So I hope to see y'all there. We're also going to do a weekly live meditation. So once a week, we'll probably start off on Mondays. We'll probably start off at 9 a.m. West Coast time, but we will be putting out a lot of surveys out there to see what times work best for people. This isn't going to be a training, but it's going to be a place to come into community, to practice raising vibrations and consciousness, to practice mindfulness together with other people. We'll get on for 10 or 15 minutes, we'll practice, and then you'll go about your day, right? Once a week. So there's going to be a touch point once a week. That is the power of the community. Of course, when we do have paid courses, people who are registered for this free community will get discounts on it. There's probably going to be more stuff. We're going to add more free trainings over time, right? This is really for you all to come together so that we can build a resilience training community where we're starting to shift the paradigm of, let me just take a self-paced course and that's it, or let me just go to a training and that's it, to let's enact what we like to call spiral learning. We keep coming back to the practice of mindfulness together over and over so that we can get better and more present and gain more expertise so that we can share it at a higher level with the people that we're working with, right? So that we can have a place to practice resiliency and self-care so that we could be more present to the people that we're serving and help them at a higher level. That's what a training community is, as opposed to just a one-off training. So we're trying to shift outside of the one-off training. My goal is that by the end of 2022, we have 1,000 members signed up. I think at the max today, there was about 650 people live with us. Right now, there's about 540. This is free, folks, so please go ahead and sign up. Fergie, if you could drop the link to the course, or excuse me, to the free community, it'll be a direct link. You just click add to order, and then boom, you sign up, you put in your information, and that's it. Like I said, we do have paid courses. We're not trying to sell you on none of that right now. We just want to build this community because we believe doing this is going to be the future of continuing education and professional development, because we certainly have a substance use crisis in this world. We certainly have a mental health crisis, and we're the ones who are shouldering that, right? There's not even enough providers. A lot of us have these huge caseloads. So that's part of why we're all coming together. So again, Fergie, if you could drop the link just a couple of times, because it gets buried in the chat sometimes. I've kept you 3 minutes over. I apologize for that. Last slide. How do you get your certificate from this training? In about 2 hours, you're going to get an email directly from me. That email's subject line is going to say how to get your certificate for this training. You're going to click on that email. There'll be a link in there. You click on the link. The first thing you do is fill out a survey. You're going to fill out the survey. That's what we need to do for continuing education purposes. It will then direct you to another page where you'll be able to download your certificate for this training. It will have everything on there except for your name. So you will either print it out and write your name in, or you will print it, you will download it and bring up the Word document and put your name in there and then save it to your computer. Okay. So, folks, I just want to thank you for being here today. I really, really hope that you'll sign up for our free community. Like I said, we want to we want to have 1,000 members before the end of the year. We're going to do a lot of surveys with those first 1,000 members. This idea that I have about like the monthly live call where we all get on and see each other in the weekly meditation, who knows, it may change, right? We're going to get together and survey everybody and see what works best so that we can continuously build this training community and uh, just do our work better and take care of ourselves. And I see a couple things coming up in the chat. If the link isn't working, apologies about that. That's the site may be taking a while to load because a lot of people are going to it right now. We're actually upgrading our bandwidth soon. So if you can't get it right now, go in a little bit later and we'll try to work on the back end to let it happen. Of course, we'll also, when we send out the webinar replay and all that stuff and the email later, we'll have links to it as well. And you can also always just go to Center for Adolescent Studies. And the first thing you'll see on there is join our free community. All right, folks, I've kept you 5 minutes over. Again, I want to send my gratitude to you all. Please practice self-care. Please take care of yourself. The work you do is important. You are important. The people who you work with are depending on you to show up as your most present self. So I wish you the best, and I hope to see you in this free community, folks. Have a good rest of your Tuesday, and please practice good self-care. All right, all. Bye-bye.